Hey, welcome to the Bearing Advisors and World Connect Energy Services webinar. We appreciate you joining us today. We believe this is going to be a very interesting webinar. We have some of really the nation and the world's leading experts on energy. We're fortunate to have Doug Schaefer from World Connect Energy, Karin Lund, the Senior Energy Consultant for World Connect, and Jason Garrett, the Director of Energy Sales for Bearing Advisors. And what our panelists are going to do today is talk a little bit about energy contracting, sustainability, what is happening with the American Rescue Plan that's going to impact, I think, local governments in a great way. So that's a little bit of laying the groundwork for our webinar. Energy is something that when we look at what's happened in Texas, when we look at what's happened in the volatility in prices up and down, when we look at the advent of solar and wind energy and other sustainable types of energy, we recognize that this is probably one of the more exciting times in history for energy and energy resources. As it relates to local governments have an opportunity, I think, in terms of looking forward, and their citizens are expecting that from them, is to provide stable, affordable energy, as an investment of the taxpayers. And so when the taxpayers are paying their taxes, I think they expect the local governments, the school systems, the counties, the cities, towns, and villages across the country to be responsible with that and to make the best energy decisions for their communities. So this is, like I say, this is an exciting time in the energy business. This is an exciting time for Bearing Advisors and World Connect Energy to be in this exciting field and to have the amount of resources that comes with being one of the largest energy providers in the world, a global company, World Connect Energy Services. And Bearing Advisors is an organization that focuses on local government and bringing local government solutions to bring value to local governments. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Karin Lund, and Karin's been a friend of mine for many years. Karin is someone who works every day with clients around the country to provide energy solutions. And we're going to start off, and I'm going to ask Karin just to tell us a little bit about what her clients are experiencing now and what's been happening as it relates to COVID and the pandemic and even the issues that happened down in Texas. Karin, great to have you with us.
Well, as a senior energy consultant, I'm responsible for generating new business while retaining and renewing my current customer base. And in terms of assisting clients with their energy needs, Jim, we take more of a holistic approach, I believe. We practice question-based consulting to determine the priorities of our customers, both from a short-term perspective and the long-term. We review their bills, find out if they're in a contract, when it ends, et cetera. And these discussions may include the installation of new lighting, new projects, purchasing new buildings, or the renovation of old buildings or properties. We also evaluate the risk tolerance of the customer, and this guides us as to what we offer the customer in terms of simple fixed rates or a more sophisticated variable rate product like a load following block and index product. It's in essence, we're evaluating their risk tolerance. And after we've determined the above, we request rates from our suppliers. We currently work with over 29 suppliers, unlike a number of our competitors. And we review contract language. We can look at the Bloomberg terminal for rate terms that are more advantageous. And then we compile an RFP analysis of rates and an evaluation of contract language for each supplier.
And Karin, when with COVID-19 and the situations like what happened down in Texas and all the kind of the buzz around energy. What are you telling your clients about their energy contracts coming into 2021?
I'm being very aggressive on the phones, contacting people that have contracts expiring into 2021, 2022, and even looking beyond that. We're finding rates have increased in most of the utilities. There's a lot of market volatility right now due to the effects of the pandemic, customer usage variations, and customer defaults. We've had 2 suppliers that have exited the retail energy market in the last 2 months, and 2 additional suppliers that have reported losses from 2020 of over $1.45 billion. So there's a lot of volatility going on right now. PJM capacity is targeted for review around mid-May, and it's projected that there will be increases, and the individual capacity obligations will be updated and adjusted as well. A lot of EDCs have seen yearly NITS increases of up to 35% in the last 2 years. So a lot going on, and a lot of good reasons for renewing your contracts now. Also, PJM was really closely watching the analysis from the Texas situation, so there could be some regulatory issues addressed in PJM, which could also result in some increases. So there's a lot going on, a lot to be paying attention to right now.
And I'm sure, Karin, from the standpoint, and that's why I guess size matters in the energy business, but World Kinect's size and scope, being a global company, what advantage does that give World Kinect when it comes to dealing with these volatilities in the market?
I think you've got the depth of the industry experience in all of the verticals that we offer our customers. I think that's incredibly important, and the fact that you have so much experience in these different sectors within our company means that we can come together as management can come together and analyze what's going on and provide options for us to provide our customers and advice as to what's going on in the marketplace.
And as we're focused today on local governments, and when you think about local governments, school districts, cities, towns, counties, villages, do they present any particular challenges when trying to arrive at the right mix of energy and sustainable, development and so forth?
Yeah. We have about 500 public entities that we currently manage programs for, as well as about 100 K through 12 school districts in Pennsylvania that we manage and manage their energy programs. Typically, the municipal sector and the school districts are more risk adverse, so they tend to make a more conservative or take a more conservative approach to their energy programs. But just as we're working with any of our other customers, it's important that we have the opportunity to explain what the complexities in the industry are. The decision makers for the municipal sector and the schools are mostly elected officials. So they have varying degrees of interests and strengths. And again, it's very important for us to be able to have the opportunity and the exposure to explain the industry to them. And this is not only to big cities, but to very small boroughs and villages and townships that we work with. So a lot of times, if I can't get in front of them, certainly have a lot of conversations, and I even make myself available for the meetings where they vote on the programs that we're recommending, so that if any of them have any questions, that they can be answered right then and there. So I think it's certainly not being able to be in touch with people has been a challenge through COVID. But I think also too is having people recognize that it's not the lowest rate that's necessarily going to be the best program for that particular municipality or sector. And I had a situation last year where I was working with a municipal authority and 2 boroughs. Someone had convinced them that they should merge all of their usage together and that they would have a lower rate. And in most cases, that is a good suggestion. But in this particular case, the largest borough with the largest usage would have had to pay a higher rate because they would be subsidizing the other 2 entities that had poor load factors. So in this example, it was better for all 3 entities to sign individual contracts. And the person who recommended this had copies of all the bills. They didn't know how or take the time to do the analysis to make the determination. So it's those kinds of things right now. There are a lot of people in the marketplace, but you really have to take a look at what's behind the consultants and the groups that you're working with, because it's really a combination of all of these factors that I've talked about that we use to help a municipality or borough or a school district make these decisions and what would be the best decision for them.
And Karin, I think if Texas taught us anything, it was that, letting this things kind of sit on the shelf without reviewing it probably is not the best idea, especially when you have things like the pandemic and these weather incidents. So it is necessary, and that's a service that World Connect provides, is the reviews and recommendations on that.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's the conversations and building the relationships that's important. And it's a challenge because the municipalities are elected officials. So when you have a new township manager or a new finance officer, you need to really re-educate them on what's important in making these decisions, and we certainly like that challenge. But it is something that's pretty unique about dealing with the municipal sector, is the fact that these are elected officials and that they do change terms with the various election.
Yeah, and I know that one thing, as a former mayor and council member for a long time in local government, with the responsibilities, you have police and fire and, the collection of taxes and finance and all, energy tends toward not rising to the top of that. But I think in some cases, and you pointed out to me one thing that I thought was very interesting, is that when the pandemic hit, no one would have ever dreamed that, let's say, an entertainment facility would be shut down for an extended period of time. And that energy, if they set a certain amount, that all of a sudden shutting down parks and playgrounds and facilities that consume energy certainly put a change in what was expected. So that was something that I thought, when you pointed that out to me a while back, I thought that's something that it would be hard to predict, but you need to have a broad enough contract that has enough variability to handle that, correct?
Well, in the case, you really want to be protected from as many of those unexpected increases as you can through the contract language. And that's what's so important about understanding the contract language. The contract language is more important than the rates. You might have a very low rate, but it may include pass-throughs, and you add those pass-throughs up through the period of the contract, and all of a sudden you're paying more than what you even expected. And because these bills are sometimes diverted over to accounting groups and administration, sometimes those increases aren't seen for a period of time. And all of a sudden you're thinking, why are our energy costs up so much? Well, you went with the lower rate, but you didn't go with the contract language, which was going to protect you from some of these additional pass-throughs and increases that the suppliers have elected to pass through. So that's why the relationship is so important, and why it's a challenge when you have a change in administration in a public entity, that you have the ability to talk with that person and get them on board with what the priorities and how you should evaluate your energy programs and decisions.
So thanks, Karin. I think, you've teed it up pretty well now, and we're going to bring in our next panelist, Jason Garrett, the Director of Energy Sales for Baring Advisors. And Jason, tell us a little bit about your kind of background and what you do with Baring Advisors.
Well, Jim, it's quite a boring story. I've been in the utility space for about 30 years now. So over time, I've happened to learn a few things through osmosis through the 30 years. I've worked for a number of retail energy providers, some that served up over 3 million customers, other that just targeted certain areas and states in the Northeast. I've run sales, marketing, profitability, full P&L responsibility. And so what I'm doing at Bearing Advisors is setting up their energy sales division and specifically working closely with World Connect on targeting these towns and municipalities, specifically this initiative in the Pennsylvania area. My background is I've worked behind over 100 utilities across North America and around 20 plus deregulated states. And specifically in Pennsylvania, I've worked behind virtually every utility that's open as the usual suspects, such as PECO, PPL, and others, but also some of the smaller utilities that are open for choice. So my role in this is to work with the customer and with World Connect to make sure that we're getting the information we need to help the townships and municipalities take some of the uncertainty out of what they're looking for and make sure that we work with them to walk them through the process and facilitate the process in the best manner.
And Jason, I know that, it sounds like a complicated, complex thing. And I'm sure that from a standpoint of a local town manager, a county manager, a school system person who's managing this, describe a little bit about the process and how, how complex it is, or how you can kind of smooth that out for people.
Actually, it's a very simple process. The first thing we need to do is, have someone, give us the information. And when you look at municipalities, townships, et cetera, share of wallet for energy related expenses can be very meaningful. And so really the first thing we need to do is get some information. And that information is as simple as the utility bill. The utility bill can tell us a lot. It can tell us, first off, where they're located. It can let us know if they're currently with a retail energy choice provider, as some customers may not be aware. They may not know if they're getting their electricity from a utility or a retail energy choice provider. And you may say, well, how could someone not know that? In most of these markets, Jim, there's something called utility consolidated billing, which means that the customer continues to get their bill from the utility, whether it be PPL or Duquesne or someone, and the retail energy provider is just a line item on the bill. And so really the first thing we need to do is get people who are interested to provide the bill information so we can take a look at it. And then from there, we would want contract information so we could start doing some analysis around the contract information. And then we can work in concert with World Connect to make sure that we pull the data that we need to start looking at usage and consumption. So the good news here, Jim, is although it may sound complex to a layman that's just wondering what they need to do with their electricity or their gas, all we need is information that can kind of kick the process off and provide information back to customers and make it extremely simple for them.
And that's a pretty transparent process. Obviously, in the local government space, everything is transparent. So that's just an exchange of information that people are providing for you. You're coming back with a recommendation, and then it's up to them to make their decisions.
Yeah, and I'd say it's up to them to make the decisions, but with us providing a few different options on what they may be able to do. And the other thing is our breadth of the ability to reach out to different marketers to get quotes. I think that really separates us from the standpoint of being able to work with World Connect to be able to reach out to, almost 30 different marketers that would be interested in perhaps providing rates to customers throughout Pennsylvania. So again, Jim, very simple process, just need a little bit of information to start us down that path.
And Jason, I know a lot of times people, have questions about it. Do you need to, just this one question that comes up, do you need the same provider for electric and gas, or is that able to be split, or how does that work?
No, that's a good question. No, you could have a provider for electricity and a separate retail energy provider for gas. You can have terms that are different. For instance, you could have an electric contract that is a 2-year contract that expires in October of 21, and you could have a gas contract with another provider that may be a 3-year contract that expires in 2023. So the good news is once you pick one provider for your electric or gas, you're not forced into having that relationship with them for both commodities. You can actively and freely shop your best, now I won't say rate, but your best overall plan for both your electricity and your gas needs.
And you know, I guess the other thing too is I know a lot of times, you know, throughout the country, you know, I think there's 18,000 cities, towns, and villages in America, and thousands of counties and school boards and all. So when you look at size, does size, you know, impact that dramatically? Can you work with smaller townships and villages that are in need of this, or is there a size that you need a certain volume or what?
No, no size requirements at all. And every customer is slightly different. You may be able to get, you know, the example that Karin used earlier when they tried to consolidate 3 municipalities and townships. I mean, you kind of heard that a larger one, you know, was going to subsidize some of the smaller ones, but that doesn't mean that smaller municipalities and townships can't save money on their electric and gas needs as well. Sometimes larger is better when it comes from just what I would say a general rate. But again, as Karin mentioned, your pass-throughs and other ancillary charges you need to be cognizant of. So whether you're a township with, you know, 100, 200,000 people or a township of 2,500 people, I'm very confident that if we work with you, we can get to the point where we're evaluating your current electricity and gas relationships, and hopefully being able to find a way to get you a better overall plan for your town or your municipality.
Great, great, Jason. I think now, and Doug Schaefer, we're going to get into the what I'd call the sexy part of the energy business. And Doug, tell us a little bit about what you do with World Kinect, and then we're going to delve in a little bit into this world of sustainability.
Sure. So I am the director of brokerage sales and managed products. I have, you know, I'm not quite as old as Jason, but I guess I'm sexier because of the topic. I have over 23 years of assisting customers in developing solutions to their energy needs. You know, I work primarily with our current sales team of 15 individuals, you know, and help guide them through the process. And then on what we call the managed product side is I have about, probably right around 30 or so customers that we have on what's called a managed product. And I work closely with them in developing hedging strategies for power, gas, and you know, recently with, you know, all the developments and all the talk around sustainability, you know, we're now helping them and helping them, you know, get them pointed in the right direction for that.
Okay. And, you know, and I mentioned earlier when we began that the American Rescue Plan is going to pump a lot of dollars into communities and counties throughout the country and school systems. And I know a lot of times, I know historically, when you look at sustainability, I've participated when I was in elected office in light retrofits, boilers, and things like that. So where does World Kinect, you know, in terms of looking at sustainability, when someone says sustainability to you, what does that kind of bring out as it relates to local governments?
Well, and I mean, it's kind of a little bit of everything. And it's like you said, it could be updating lighting, boilers. It could be installing solar panels. It can be purchasing, you know, biofuels, really anything that a city, a township, municipality uses as far as energy. We can assist them and helping them go down that pathway, that journey of sustainability. There's many different ways, you know, that you can do it. While there are some common elements for everybody to that journey, it's definitely a different road for everybody that's involved. And that's where we sit down and take the time with the customer to help develop that plan going forward and what's the best way to do it. It's not necessarily a walk into their office, wave a magic wand, and they're 100% sustainable, 100% carbon free. It's definitely a process that takes some time, and we help guide them along that path.
And one of the big, money always comes up as an obstacle at times. But I know back when they were doing the retrofits on lighting and on some of the other energy efficient things, and then some of the work that I've done and talked to people around the country, it seems like there's a new look at the ability to finance these projects through the existing bills and so forth. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we have several partnerships where the client can go through and start down that pathway, and they can go in and they can do retrofitting of lighting, boilers, HVAC systems. And what the partnership allows us to do is we have suppliers that will provide, they'll put in everything up front. There'll be no upfront out-of-pocket expense for the customer. And then what they do is they try to take the savings that occur through the program to offset that cost, and it's paid back over time. So the easiest way to hopefully describe that is, let's just say you spend $20,000 a year for electricity, and we can come in and put new lights and maybe update your HVAC system, which would take your bill down to $15,000 a year. Well, what happens is over the next few years, you continue to pay $20,000, but that $5,000 goes back to the supplier who provided those retrofits. And then once that's all paid for, then you start to realize that $5,000 in savings. So there's no upfront cost to you.
And that's exciting, I think, from a standpoint that, the public tends to like the idea of sustainability. And I've used over the years kind of that analogy as, when people would sometimes ask me when I'd be out talking to people about sustainability, I said, it's kind of like the guy who sells the faucets, years ago, is that, the water's coming out of the mountain and it just runs 24 hours a day. It's only used a very small amount of time when people are getting their buckets. And one day a guy came up and brought a faucet as a technology and said, let's just use this when we need it, and and conserve the resource. And I think that's a little bit of what we're talking. We have the, solar has proven itself, I think, without a question across the country. And it's creating, Tesla and Elon Musk now, that's one of their big pushes is on the battery storage, that they're going to be developing individual batteries. But I think one of the things that is really relevant to local governments is the ability that in a town of 10,000, 50,000, a million people, there's a lot of different options for sustainability in those entities. And I looked, there was a town up in Michigan that was doing a collective solar program where they were letting citizens purchase solar panels in an abandoned landfill. And citizens got to participate and gain the benefits of that because they were feeding some of the energy back to the grid, but they didn't have, they didn't have to put it on their roof, I guess is the thing.
Right.
And I think that's where local governments, the innovation with school systems, with counties, and all of the different buildings that governments own, it represents, I think, an opportunity, doesn't it?
Absolutely. We've been working, I'm out of Pittsburgh, and we've been working with some local school districts in evaluating solar projects. And, we're really close to that final go, no go strategy. We've assisted the Pittsburgh International Airport, developed a microgrid. And part of that microgrid was putting in a solar array over a piece of their property that they couldn't use. We're working with a couple large scale manufacturers in greening up, and they have land to put up a solar array and to kind of, do what they see as their part in the sustainability, programs that are out there. And there are so many, different opportunities. There's constantly new technologies evolving. And what we do is, again, we sit down with the customer, put a plan in place and then start them down that pathway. And that pathway, can start as simply as, new lights. Once you start to realize that savings, you could put in a solar array where, again, you have no cost to put in that array, and you enter into an agreement to just buy the power off of that if you want, or there's the option where you can pay for it and put it in yourself. To then looking at, renewable energy credits, carbon offset programs. There's a lot of different roads the customers can travel down to get to their ultimate goal.
Yeah, and it's like I said, to me, if there was ever an exciting time, I mean, this almost takes us, back, when Edison and Tesla and Nicholas Tesla was were creating the type of lighting that would kind of sustain America, for all of those years, and the world, in fact. We're at a time now where, when some of these technologies evolve, I think we're going to be looking at a whole new way of energy that, it's still going to be a mix, correct? And that's another myth out there that one will completely, remove the other. But oil and gas and even coal still has a role across the country, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Obviously the sun's not always shining. The wind is not always blowing. So you do need, natural gas and coal to provide that base load. And even on the grids, there's a lot of talk, over the next 10 to 15 years with the electrification of vehicles, the demand that's going to create as well. So you could see a fundamental shift from, in power, they have on peak, off peak. And typically your on peak is during the day when everybody's using electricity. Prices tend to be a little bit higher than, in the night. But, that could start to change as everybody drives home and plugs their car in, and you have that demand coming all night. So, and as you've seen, just, over the last, 10 to 15 years, you look at the technology and how it's changed, even from a cell phone when, and I guess I'm dating myself, when you used to carry that brick around with you, to now, something that just fits in your front pocket and has more computing power than I think the computers they used to put a man on the moon. So we're going to see the same things. There's a lot of development coming, or new technology with, solar, with the panels themselves and being able to produce more electricity, with, even solar being able to put a film over the window that can capture the sunlight and create electricity. So we're going to see a lot of changes there, and definitely a lot of changes with batteries and storage systems, where during the day, if you have a solar system in and you're not using all the production off of that, you can put it into a battery and store it, and have it saved for peak times that can help lower your bills during those higher stress times on the grid.
Great. And I thought, Jason, why don't you chime in a little bit on the sustainable side? I know from someone who's had a long history in the energy business, what's your view on that as it relates especially to local governments?
I think, Doug summed it up very well. It's come a long way. Used to be very intrusive, kind of your reference to making sure, putting things on your roof, now, from just, my opinion, what's very interesting right now are community solar parks, municipalities and townships that can develop community solar. So one of these smaller municipalities, co-op, townships, whatever, could develop a small, kind of community solar, and the township can benefit from that. And so people in the township can feel good about it. It doesn't necessarily have to be a structure that's on a roof. And then also some of the technology that Doug talked about is just the film that's coming out. I do think that, over the next 3 to 5 years, things are going to become even more opportunistic for individuals to participate in sustainability. So I think it's something that all the townships need to kind of think about and keep in the front of their mind, is that they may look at it and say, I really don't think we can potentially do this, but World Connect brings a lot of different solutions to the table. And so having that discussion, I think, would be beneficial.
And Jim, if I can add, and I think the biggest thing in all of this that a customer, needs to understand is we are there as a partner, as an advisor. And as Jason said, while it may seem a very complex, overall program, at the end of the day, it's very simple. We walk our customers through it. We advise them on the cost. And then at that point, the customer truly has a go, no-go decision, and we make sure that they're getting in the right program that fits their needs and, as kind of stewards of the taxpayer's dollar, they have to make sure they're making good decisions, and we definitely advise them, on that. And there's absolutely no problem if we get to the point where, it's kind of like a no-go. Well, let's hold off and we'll continue to watch, the technology evolve, and then we'll revisit it, at the right time.
Yeah, and that's one of those interesting things. I know when years back when LED lighting came out, and it was, the new, everybody thought, oh, it's going to replace everything right away. And it took a period of time for it to evolve into the efficiencies that many of the cities, and it actually turned out not to be a big loss there was still gains to be made, but by the time, or even before the bills were paid, the technology had advanced to save even more energy, that companies were coming back in and saying, let's retrofit again. And I think, I guess that evolution, it probably in the last 20 years, like with LED, it just dramatically changed in improving. And has it reached a point, do you think, that it's leveled off a little bit, or because it's fascinating to me as the technology keeps improving so much that it's like the price of VCRs, they keep going down. Of course, now they don't even have them, I guess, but that was the thing, that technology moves so quick in this that it is exciting that you can really save.
Yeah, no, and unfortunately, I think, it's always going to change. I think there was that famous quote, I forget, I think it was somebody in the 1920s saying, everything that can be invented has been invented already, and, as you can tell, things are a little different now. You kind of see that hockey stick, as development, and even what you're seeing with, the electric vehicles. At first they came out, they maybe had a 200-mile range, and now they're at 300, 400, 500, and everybody's still, there's so much out there around batteries, and I think that technology going forward is really going to be a key, for customers. But I think when you look at the technology, yes, you might pull up a solar array, today, and maybe in 5 to 10 years, it's more efficient. And it may get to the point where if it's that much more efficient, you can, change it out, and replace your panels and do something new. But you don't want to get paralyzed to the fact that, I don't want to do something today because tomorrow there might be something better. I think you just make those decisions, and, if they make sense, dollar wise, you move forward with those. And as new technologies come out, you adjust accordingly.
Right. And Karin, I thought it might be interesting. Give us a little insight. Are your clients accepting of the new technologies? Are they wanting to participate, or is that something still a little bit where there's some reluctance on the part of clients?
Well, I think it's interesting you mentioned that, because I've got one program or contract I'm negotiating this week, and one of the issues is that I want to know from each supplier what percentage is from renewable energy. And so we're starting to see this. We've seen it on a corporate level with suppliers to big customers, putting pressure on the big customers to do something in terms of sustainability. So in terms of the municipality sector, you are elected official, and you have to listen to your constituents. So as people see that they're moving more towards these sustainability projects in their own companies, I think they're going to come back to where they live and say, what is my community doing? What is my township doing? What is my city doing? What is my borough doing in terms of becoming less energy dependent? So I think it's a dialogue not only from the standpoint of the actual products that are available that are changing, but also people's ideas that where I live, I want to make sure, we're being as responsible as we can be as far as addressing these issues. So yeah, I'm seeing more customers ask about percentages of renewables and start those dialogues. And I think that's only going to continue.
Yeah, Jim, and just to add to that, like what Karin said, it definitely is, you do have a large group of customers that are looking to do it themselves. And then you do have ones that maybe don't have a plan and they're not even thinking about it. But if they're part of a supply chain, I believe Apple, they're greening up their entire supply chain. So it's like, if you want to do business with us, you need to show us how you're being sustainable and green in what you're doing. And we're seeing that with some of our larger customers that, sell products that they're outlets for their products. The customers are starting to ask them what they're doing, and they may get forced. And I'm not saying that this is going to happen or could happen, but even from a government standpoint, it could be easy, for the federal government to kind of say, hey, if you want federal funds, we need to see what you're doing, regarding sustainability. So it definitely, is probably coming down the road at some point for everybody.
Yeah, and when you do, especially in local governments, when you travel around and see what's happening in terms of, when you mention electric cars, one of the things about the somewhat limited range is that, and I always would ask people, like a code official in a city or, the dog warden and other folks, you'd say, well, how many times do you travel 200 miles in one trip? And they'd say never. And it's like, well, then that probably is a very viable option for you to look at electric vehicles and that. So, we have a couple questions that came in, and one of them I think probably hits with Jason is, and everybody, this is the typical, is everybody looks at, how do I get the cheapest rates? So Jason, how do you handle that when people are looking at price and, how do I get that cheapest rate available?
Yeah, it's interesting that the question came in specifically said rate, because if you're looking for the cheapest rate, you may not get the best overall contract. And so what you really want to focus on is getting the best rate coupled with the contract terms. And so people really need to understand what's included in their rate. What type of contract are they on? Are they on a full requirements? Is there swing pricing involved? And so when people look at their electric or gas, what I would say contract, stay away from, although it always ends up in a rate discussion, understand the definition of that rate, because if it's commodity only and you're enticed with a really low rate, it may not be the most cost-effective contract for you, because there could be additional ancillary pass-through charges that turns your 3.5 cent rate into 9.5, and someone else offered an all-in rate of 8. It's not about rate, it's about contract terms and what's included and not included.
Yeah, and I think Karin certainly reinforced that too, is that, and I've learned it. I mean, that's one thing that I've been learning more and more about this, is that, when you're signing a contract, that's committing you in for a somewhat specific point of time. And if you don't have the right terms, you're living with that, the results of that contract, right?
Absolutely.
I was just going to add one thing. And again, if the bills are pushed through an administrative system, you might not even see the impact of those energy costs, increased energy costs, maybe at the end of the quarter when you're doing a quarterly reporting or something like that. And by then you're 3 months into, what did we do? And why are these additional charges, on the contract? So.
And hey, Jim, I just want to mention one more thing because we've had a very in-depth discussion, but just from a customer's perspective or someone who may be listening out there, I may say, well, what do I need to do? What does this cost me to get, this kicked off? And I just want to be completely transparent on it, is that there's no obligation from a customer's perspective. It's simply sharing information. This is a service that's provided free of charge for the initial, kind of going out, doing our due diligence. So the only thing that people really have to is a time commitment for either a phone call, an email, and pulling together some information. There's no financial commitment to it. And so if we believe that between Bearing Advisors and World Connect that we can work with an entity and get them a more effective rate, and our contract terms, as I should say, there's no cost obligation to people. It's no harm, no foul. Reach out, have a discussion, and we'll see. Maybe go back to you and say, "Man, you have a really advantageous contract, and you did a good job negotiating that. Congratulations. We can help you move forward and keep us in mind." Or it may be, wow, you've got a little bit of hair on this contract and we think we may be able to go out and do something for you. But in either event, there's no upfront cost. It's simply a conversation that needs to occur.
Great. And that's probably we've had, like you said, this has been a fascinating discussion. One of the benefits, I think, of the technology of the pandemic has forced everyone into these virtual meetings. And I know they're difficult, and I know people that spend hours and hours on on Zoom calls and other calls. But it is a good way of transmitting information. And we're going to be working with World Connect at Bearing Advisors to keep connected with our local government partners. So Doug, I think we're going to be putting out some weekly information, sending out to our list. So we'll have our contact information available. There'll be new information coming out. The one thing I would point out is that as the American Rescue Plan gets clarified and it's a little more defined as to when the rules come out, we'll come back with other information as we gather it, as how it applies to some of these projects that a local government may want to undertake. And I think that, adds in a factor that wasn't here 6 months ago, that says now there is additional dollars looking at that infrastructure. There's going to be some additional resources out there. And with companies like World Connect and Bearing Advisors to kind of keep ahead of the curve, hopefully we'll be able to serve local governments in a way that will bring them value and hopefully a more sustainable future. But I would like to thank our panelists and hope that our initial webinar has been well received, and we thank everyone for joining us. This is Jim Hunt from Bearing Advisors, and our guests are our resource people, Karin Lund, Doug Schaefer, and Jason Garrett, and we appreciate your time today to spend with us on this. Thank you very much. This is the conclusion of the webinar.